The question, of course, is whether Zelensky gets to attend. And of course, if the White House pushed Zelensky coming, how does the Russian
Mm.
side take that? Because there's been a lot more skepticism on the Russian side about Zelensky being present at a meeting. Putin has at times not even acknowledged Zelensky's status in terms of as leader of Ukraine.
Donald Trump will hold talks with Vladimir Putin in Alaska for Ukraine this Friday. The White House is reportedly weighing up inviting Ukraine's president too, with a White House spokesperson saying all three could yet attend together. Well, every Sunday at this time, I'm joined by one of the Times' brilliant journalists stateside for a roundup of all the political news from Washington, D.C. And today, I'm delighted to say that the hardest working woman in Washington, the Times' Washington editor, Katy Balls, is here. Good afternoon, Katy. Good morning for you.
Good morning from DC.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here, Katy. Good Lord, where do we even start? I mean, I guess we have to start with the Ukraine talks. So what we do know so far, we know that Trump and Putin are definitely meeting in Alaska on Friday. We think maybe Zelensky might be coming along now. What more do we know?
Well, yes, I think a great update. So they picked Alaska, and that does mean, of course, this meeting, which Trump has wanted to arrange, I think, really since he returned to the White House. Of course, if we go back to just before he returned to the White House, his campaign for 2024, he was talking about fixing the Ukraine conflict in a day. That has not happened. We're just over 200 days in. But this meeting has always been seen as quite key to getting to a point where you can start to work out what a settlement or an end to the conflict, use inverted commas where necessary on some of these things, might start to look like. And I think to have it in America on home turf, allowing Donald Trump to announce it and so forth, has been something the White House already sees as an achievement. The question, of course, is whether Zelensky gets to attend. And of course, if the White House pushed Zelensky coming, how does the Russian
Mm.
side take that? Because there's been a lot more skepticism on the Russian side about Zelensky being present at a meeting. Putin has at times not even acknowledged Zelensky's status in terms of as leader of Ukraine. So that's where it starts to get more complicated. The meeting between Putin and Trump in theory is the first step to then a period of brokering peace, and then the UK has had a bit of this in terms of some of these talks because of course we have JD Vance in Chevening staying with David Lammy, and then yesterday JD Vance and the US side decided to have meetings at David Lammy's house, his Grace and Faysver house, and had various EU figures visit them.
I'll come back to the Chevening bromance weekend in a sec, Katy, but I just wanted to ask you just on the Ukraine talks before we move on. I mean, European leaders are very concerned that this meeting, even on Friday, might end with a bit of a carve up of Ukraine. I mean, how likely do you think it is that it will get that far in this first meeting between Trump and Putin?
But the truth is, it's just hard to know how
Mm.
much they're going to get done in this meeting because we go back, Putin and Trump met once in their first term. I think at that meeting, some of the things Trump said raised eyebrows on the American side. You also have Steve Witkoff, his envoy, who's been visiting Russia. Often Witkoff does not bring the full official team that some would have expected the US peace negotiator to bring. So I think that what you can say, there's a lack of formality and a level of unpredictability when it comes to this
Mm.
administration and how they're dealing with Putin, which means it's quite hard to work out how much is going on. Some in DC were not, senior figures were surprised that Witkoff came back this week, and actually there was enough progress to get this meeting. So I think people are a little bit just seeing how it goes. But to the point about a carve up or land, it does feel as though every scenario that the White House has been talking about or thinking about does involve Ukraine ceding some
Mm.
territory. The question is that territory pre this Ukraine also more like
Mm.
Crimea, or is it actually about where things are in terms of the current battlefield? And at that point, is it because it's a frozen conflict, or are you renaming the territory? So there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll find out more on Friday. Katy, as you mentioned, JD Vance, the Vice President, has spent the weekend with our Foreign Secretary. We know that David Lammy was planning to put some pressure on JD Vance to soften the US position on Gaza. We know now that they also discussed the details of the Alaska summit yesterday. It's not exactly light material for a weekend away, is it? JD Vance has been adamant that the position won't shift on Palestine. I mean, what inroads on both of these subjects do we think Lammy might have been able to make over the course of the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange version of a holiday. I had someone in DC described it to me as a busman's holiday
Mm.
that JD Vance is currently on, in the sense that he is obviously stay, and I think JD Vance wanted to stay with David Lammy. Of course, he goes to the Cotswolds next, but I think for the whole time he is here, he has various meetings, potentially with leaders of the other political parties, potentially with other political figures he's interested in, cultural sites and so forth. That
It's not
I
a
think is
holiday
going to
at all.
test.
No.
It's going to test at least lots of people in Britain's definition of what a holiday looks like, I believe, in the coming week. But as for these talks, I mean, I think David Lammy and JD Vance have a good personal relationship, but that's not because they share the same views on Palestine, freedom of speech, even the economy to a degree. I think they bond over their Christianity, I think their upbringings and so forth. So I, I mean, I think staying with the Foreign Secretary for several days, of course, means David Lammy is in a good position to explain the UK side on Palestine when it comes to Israel's talking about governing Gaza, and obviously the UK position on recognising the Palestinian state. I suspect JD Vance's views and the administration views are far too clear on this for Lammy to have much of a chance at changing it. I think the area where probably the UK can influence more is more in
Mm.
humanitarian aid and getting that into Gaza than I can't currently see any situation where the US would say, oh, let's recognize Palestine as a state. I think they see it unhelpful what the Europeans have done here,
Mm.
but perhaps in a sign of the good relationship between the US and the UK, they're more happy publicly criticizing Emmanuel Macron and France for this than the UK.
Yeah, interesting. Katie, you've got a great piece in the Sunday Times today about possible successors to Trump. I can't actually believe it's that time again, and we're already talking about the 2028 election. Good Lord. But I guess, that it is something which, people in DC are probably always thinking about. You write about two of the potential frontrunners from a field of what could potentially be 30, Marco Rubio and, of course, JD Vance. Could that be a potentially popular ticket together?
Well, I think could it be popular and is it doable? The two questions. And you are right, 2028 is very far away. So I myself pondered this. Is it too early? But
Never too early, it
Donald Trump
seems.
has been talking about it this week. He was asked about it at an event and started talking about Vance as a likely heir apparent, but did not go all the way. And then JD Vance was asked about it in Chevening. And it was the one topic, we're talking about the things he was talking about. It was the one topic where he suddenly was quite camera shy, which I think is always, as a journalist, okay, if you don't want to talk about that, let's look into it. And I think when it comes to that ticket, I think it's Donald Trump's way of saying JD Vance has a chance, but don't, he is not completely his yet. So let's talk about this other person in the cabinet who's doing well. I think that you can see some appeal to the ticket if you're thinking about the states they represent. So you have Ohio, you have, Rubio's a Miami man, and both did not come from rich backgrounds. So you think about how the Republicans have made inroads with working class voters in recent years. There's something there potentially. But I suspect actually getting the two men to agree to a joint ticket would be quite hard to do.
Mm.
And I was speaking to a biographer of Rubio and also some around Rubio. And I think once you run for president, which he did in 2016, of course, you do start to get it in your head that you could be president.
Mm.
And therefore, would you really be happy to say, okay, yes, I'll be the vice? Because Rubio and Vance competed previously to be vice president for Donald Trump.
Mm.
So I think that is one of the complications with this. There are some who would suggest that, do you want to have a man and a woman on the ticket? That can often help with female voters, though, of course, in the 2024 campaign, they focused a lot on the male vote and had success there. I put it to a few figures in MAGA, and they suggested I was being woke for asking the question.
Well, I was going to ask that, Katie. I mean, are the days of thinking that a ticket should, I don't know, maybe involve a woman, are those days long gone now?
Well, I think the way people look at it is changing. And of course, Donald Trump won the election not having women as the pick. And you did have figures around saying, oh, your campaign's a bit laddish, Vance isn't cutting through in the way we thought. But also the whole campaign was focused a little bit on the manosphere. If you think about lots of those podcasts Donald Trump did, and really cutting through with voters, Hispanics. They also made large inroads with lots of different men who didn't traditionally vote Republican. So I think from the Republican perspective, at least, it is not seen as something which is really going to move it either way in a negative or positive way. So, but other mega figures, things worth saying, said they believe that when it comes to the number of people who are going to go for 2028, you're looking at potentially 30 or more contenders.
Wow.
And they said you've got to remember nearly every person in the cabinet, probably every person thinks they could be the next president. So I think the idea of Donald Trump anointing them. And then I spoke to Steve Bannon, of course, a senior figure in MAGA world, and he was saying, actually, no, the person who's going to win this is Donald Trump. So we're just going to work out how he can run again. So there's 31 options for you.
Thank you. We look forward to whittling it down over the course of the next 3.5 years, Katy. My two quick questions before we let you go, Katy, is how hot is it? I've spent several Augusts in DC myself. How hot is it? And is your air conditioning up to scratch?
It is really hot. It was slightly cooler for a few days this week. But I've got quite addicted to the air conditioning. As someone who was born in Aberdeen, I find that the very hardcore air conditioning makes me feel like I'm at home. If I then imagine I'm outside.
Well, the storms are quite amazing outside. You can watch a lot of heavy rain and be very cold inside. So it would just like home for you, Katy. Wonderful. That's Katy Balls, who is, of course, the Washington editor for The Times. And you can read all of her work today in the Sunday Times.